All right. I would like to thank you for joining the Southport Coalition's District 38 Town Hall for State Senator. My name is Rashard Snellings. I will be your moderator for this evening. Tonight we have three of our four candidates. We have Melody Bray with us, Adam Petty, as well as Michael Carson. Thank you very much for joining. At this time, I would like to turn it over to our candidates. We will start with Ms. Melody Bray. I want to give you 3 minutes for opening remarks. You have the floor, Ms. Brady.
Thank you so much, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to connect with folks today. Again, my name's Melody Bray. I'm running for Georgia State Senate District 38. A little bit about me. I'm a first-generation immigrant who's been living in and loving Metro Atlanta for about 18 years now. I currently run my own real estate business, but I'm also an attorney that worked in the government sector for a decade or so, litigating cases, everything from officer-involved shootings to cases where our school boards or teachers were getting sued. And doing that allowed me to see just how our justice system works for some while it horribly fails others. I was also part of the City Roots ATL, which is a grassroots housing advocacy organization. And we sought to keep housing affordable and make sure our residents who have been living here with their families for generations can stay here in a safe and affordable house. Most recently, I co-founded the Georgia 55 Project, which became one of the largest grassroots get out the vote organizations in Atlanta. Last election, we equipped neighbors with everything from election education to practical information, even providing folks with rides, kind of like an Uber one-to-one, getting people to the polls. And at a time when our schools aren't being funded, so our kids can't attend a safe school where they can learn and get ahead, when housing's increasingly unaffordable, when people can't find jobs or they have to cobble together 2 and 3 jobs in order to get a living wage just to make ends meet. I'm not sure if folks on the call are aware, but we have an absentee senator who is not advocating for us and has not for years. I'm running to be a Georgia State Senator because at this time, which is such an important time, every single seat at the Capitol must have a true advocate that's actively pushing us toward passing laws that help our neighbors thrive, someone who will actually show up for us, who will speak up on our behalf about what matters, and I intend to do just that. But I'm not just running because we haven't been represented, I'm also running because I have a vision for our city and for our state, and I think we need creative and innovative leaders who are wanting to do something different. If we keep doing the same thing, we're gonna keep getting the same results. So again, I'm Melody Bray. You can check out my website at brayforgasenate.com. And thank you so much for having me this evening.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Next, we will go over to Mr. Carson. Mr. Carson, you have the floor. Thank you.
Hi, thank the Southport Coalition for having me this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys as well as those who are joining us. I'm Michael Carson. I'm a husband, father. My wife and I will be celebrating our 30th anniversary this July, so we're really excited about that and excited to be going on vacation soon after this campaign is over. So we're really looking forward to it. 2 adult sons. I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran. I'm also have been a paralegal for about 35 years. I started out in the Air Force as a paralegal, and that's where I learned my trade. So I've worked for a number of law firms and organizations throughout the year, helping attorneys and helping those firms practice various laws from tax litigation to personal injury to intellectual property law. I have been a community advocate for, God knows, pretty much my entire life, making sure that I represent and advocate on behalf of marginalized communities, particularly men, women, and youth who are incarcerated, who have been incarcerated. I like to say I cut my teeth in that space back in 1998 when I was afforded the opportunity to meet with a group of individuals who I had no clue what I would say or what I would do, and somebody invited me into space to speak with men who were incarcerated. From that point on, I work to make sure that they're not only from their voting rights, but from their housing rights, and just anything relative to that we make sure that we took care of and make sure that they were made whole when they return back to society. So I'm really grateful for that work and the work with Congressman Danny Davis on the Second Chance Act in Illinois. And I've been here now in Georgia for 8 years, doing a number of things here in both Cobb County and Fulton County, as well as in the city of South Fulton, which is represented here tonight. So I'm looking forward to being your next state senator, again, because we are void of visible and viable leadership in this state seat. Oftentimes we hear about the representatives in South Fulton, but we never hear about this legislator for the city of South Fulton and for South Fulton, as well as for Cobb County. I've had those conversations with stakeholders in both counties and understand what those needs are, and have been working with them for a number of years to address a number of things. So I put my hat in, not just for the sake of being a state senator, but for one that will, what I call a community senator, one who will work beyond the 40-day legislative session, but those 325 days throughout the year to make sure that your needs are met. So for more information about me and about my candidacy, you can go to carsonforsenate.com or email me at info@carsonforsenate.com. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. And I would like to turn it over for our final introductory comment to Adam Petty. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snellings, and thank you to the South Fulton Coalition for having us all here tonight. Thank you for all of the citizens of South Fulton and for all those other concerned citizens of Georgia and elsewhere who've decided to join us on this Zoom tonight. Again, my name is Adam Petty, and I am a candidate for Senate District 38. I reside in Southwest Atlanta with my wife, Tanisha, and our 16-year-old pup, Bruno. We are in what we call the West Cascade neighborhood of Southwest Atlanta, just a stone's throw from South Fulton. Literally, I can take a rock out of my front door and just throw it and land. It would land in South Fulton. So very intimately familiar with South Fulton. I'm very much appreciative of this opportunity to speak with South Fulton residents who are really my neighbors. A little bit about me. About 15 years ago, I decided, I was a computer programmer at the time, and I decided I desperately needed a change in my life. And I needed to do something that was more purposeful and that would give me a different opportunity to serve my local community. So it was at that point I decided that I wanted to go to law school and be an attorney. So I went to law school, graduated. Thankfully, I passed the bar. And at that point, I decided to commission into the United States Army. Now, service in the military is nothing new for my family. It goes way back to the Civil War, where my great-great-great-grandfather served in the U.S. Colored Troops Cavalry. My grandfather, still alive to this day, is a Marine, served 30 years Marine Corps, served in Korea and Vietnam Wars. So it was something that I had seen my entire life. I've had my father served in the military. I have aunts, uncles, and cousins who've also served. So it was in 2012 when I decided to also answer that call and serve in the military. I served 6.5 years on active duty. Some of those assignments included prosecuting cases, defending criminal cases, being a military magistrate, and also included a deployment to Afghanistan from 2015 to 2016. I still serve. I'm in the Army Reserve now, Major in the United States Army Reserve, and I just love this opportunity to serve. After leaving active duty, my wife and I decided to move right here to Southwest Atlanta. We moved here about 4 years ago, and I began working as a prosecutor in the Fulton County DA's office. And I was a gang prosecutor, so I prosecuted the entire range of serious violent felonies, all the way from murder down to armed robbery, aggravated assaults, and even drug cases down at the West End, just to clean up or help clean up our local communities. I did that for 2.5 years, specializing in gang cases. And at that point, I decided I needed to do something to also continue to help, but to help from the other side. So I began my own law practice, the Petty Firm, in 2021, just a little over a year ago, where I am a criminal defense attorney. And that has been my experience for the past over 10 years now, mostly criminal law as a judge or as a magistrate, as a prosecutor, and as a defense attorney. I am not originally from Atlanta, from New Jersey originally. As I mentioned, Tanisha and I moved here And we specifically chose this particular area of Georgia. We chose Southwest Atlanta really because of its rich history.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Because of its legacy of civil rights, because of the traditions that are here. And we wanted to be a part of this community. So we chose to move here, and we've absolutely enjoyed every single moment we've had to live, work, and play right here in the city of Atlanta. I am the candidate to bring fresh and bold voice to this district. I am the candidate that will bring new ideas and passion for service. I appreciate this opportunity to serve. I've served in the military because I wanted to serve. I wanted to help make my community safer. I served as a DA because I wanted to also put in the groundwork to make my community safer. And now I want to serve you as a state senator to also help make our community safer. You can find out more about me at adam4ga.com. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for those introductions. Now, for our public, we have 3 of our 4 candidates. The incumbent, I was not able to reach her, and she did not respond to my email. So we have Melody Bray here tonight, Michael Carson, as well as Adam Petty. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to the public for you to ask any questions that you have for the candidates. Please use the reactions button to raise your hand. Once I see your hand raised, I will acknowledge you. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to the public to ask any questions of our candidates that you would like to ask. Please limit your question to 45 seconds. Candidates, please limit your response to 2 minutes. Now, I don't see any hands just yet. I will start us off with the first question. This is a question that was actually emailed to us. And the question is, and this is going to be for all of the candidates, utilizing the current data available, District 38 encompasses 14 zip codes. How will you successfully address the current needs of such a vast economic and educational demographic? And we will start with you first, Ms. Bray. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good point. The district is extremely different from north to south and east to west. But going out and knocking doors and talking to people at the doors, there are things that weave us all together. We all want to feel safe where we are. We all want to have opportunity. We want our children to be better off than we are. And we want to be able to provide for ourselves. And that is something that crosses any sort of economic bounds, background, how you were brought up. That's something as humans that we all want. And so the policies that I'm proposing in the areas of affordable housing, education, healthcare, et cetera, all of those things go toward, does it make us safer? Does it give us more opportunity? And does it give people the ability to live the life that they want to live?
Thank you very much. And I will turn it over to Mr. Carson. You have the floor.
Thank you for the question. One of the clarion calls have been, as I've met with constituents in Cobb County and Fulton County, is, wow, you're the first person that's ever knocked on my door. You're the first person I've ever met who's either running for office, who are currently in office. So that is a surprise to them. But I think on day one, I think May 25th is when there will be a need, and there has to be a plan to galvanize particular individuals in those various zip codes, such that you will have a communication avenue to make sure things get out. Someone had asked me, if a bill was before you, or if you were presenting a bill, how would you make sure that the people would know? It's about building those relationships. It's about making sure that there is a plan in place where you reach out to what I would call the community, not only the community advocates, but the brand ambassadors for the district. Those individuals who will be able to be the eyes and ears for me, such that I can reach them quickly, and then they could disseminate the information out. I think that's important, but it's about building those relationships. Again, as I said, it's not about the 40 days in the legislature, it's about the 325 days. So if you have those relationships beforehand, if you continue to build on those relationships, then making sure those individuals are notified, making sure they're able to receive the information and to disseminate that information shouldn't be difficult at all.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Petty, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. That's a great point. This is a huge district with varying neighborhoods and communities, but I believe there are two things that really kind of unite us. One, in this district, we do have an absence of leadership. I think we can all agree that in each corner and everywhere in between of this district, there are neighborhoods and there are people who feel left behind. They feel uneducated and uninformed, and we need to do better. We need to actually take a step and move this district forward. And we can do that by recognizing the second thing, which is the commonalities between us all. We all want to make sure that our kids can go to safe schools, that kids can go to fully funded schools and receive an education that's either college preparatory or even skill oriented as a trade school. We all want to make sure that we're all safe and we can go to the gas station and go out late at night and enjoy this great community that we live in and be able to be safe and make sure that we come home without being shot, without being robbed. We want to make sure that our senior citizens are taken care of and that they can stay in their homes and make sure that they have places to stay as they become more senior. And all of these things are interests that we all have. And I think that ultimately we have to recognize that the only way to make these things better and to address them is to address them. And that's going to take constant work every single day, talking to constituents, knocking on doors, responding to emails, doing the simple things that matter, making sure that we build a relationship with each and every corner and pocket of this district to make sure that not exactly what I want as a state senator, but what our constituents actually want is what is the first priority.
Thank you very much. Our first question from the audience comes from Mr. Harvey Davis. Mr. Davis, you have the floor.
Yes, we all know the numbers in the legislature, and one of the questions that I had for the past mayor, Kasim Reed, was with the relationships that we have with most of our candidates running in the minority party, what can you do as a freshman legislator to be able to actually take a bill and get it enacted into law?
Mr. Davis, is that a question for all the candidates or just one?
Yes, all of the candidates.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Bray, you have the floor.
So a couple things, because there is some practicalities as a freshman that you can't just walk in and say, this is how I want things done. So relationship building is huge, which I've already started doing with folks who are at the Dome. And being able to use essentially the social capital of more senior senators to tack those people onto the bill and use their clout to push yours forward. So that's one. And one of the reasons why it's so egregious that we have an absentee senator is because you can't build relationships if you aren't there. So making sure that we actually have face-to-face conversations with folks who are already there and getting their buy-in to push things forward. And then secondly, when you're talking about particularly being in the minority party, even if you can't stop something from happening, you can at least make folks do what they're doing in the daylight, right? So if you're going to pass a bill that's going to hurt people, you're not going to pass it in the shadows. It's a matter of communicating out to you guys so that you know what's happening and you know who did it. And there's power in the knowledge of knowing who's coming for you, you know? So being sure that we keep open in communication and making sure that everybody who is in District 38 is aware of where these bills are coming from and how they're going to affect us down the line.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Petty, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. That's a great question. I appreciate it. One of the things that we can do is just continue to build relationships all across all three levels. So we need to make sure that we have a partnership with our local governments, our city councils, our city mayors, up to our level at the state level in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. And then also with our elected congressmen and women and our senators who are also serving these districts that we live in. I think ultimately some of those relationships may not exist or they may be injured a little bit right now. We need to come in and first acknowledge that and figure out what we need to do to fix that. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick, but we can do it if we're dedicated to doing so. The other thing is I like to talk about education. I think that we need to educate ourselves as constituents who live in this district about the issues and the things that really matter to us. And as senator, my job would be to help educate our constituents and let them know exactly what's happening at the Gold Dome, let them know exactly what bills have been proposed and by whom and why they're being proposed, and what the caucus and my position would be. The other thing is I'd like to learn. I'd like to learn from our constituents how they feel about that particular proposed bill, what they want to see happen from it, what they want to see me as a state senator do in response to that bill. And we've got to work together with our senior senators who've been in the legislature for a while. We need to talk to them, glean information and wisdom from them, and utilize them as a resource, not coming in and thinking that we can kind of take over. But let's come in there day one and sit, humble ourselves, and listen. And by doing that, we'll be more informed, more educated, and able to have a platform and agenda that can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Carson, you have the floor.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Davis. I'm proud to say that over the years, I've had relationships with a number of elected officials from the state, local and county level. I have their phone numbers, their personal cell phone numbers in my phone. I can reach out to them and call them if I need to at a moment's notice. So I think those relationships are important. Those relationships are valuable, such that, again, working with them to make sure that their needs are the needs that they express are met, as well as constituents, I think are important. The other thing, oftentimes when you hear legislators across the aisle talk about things they care about and bills they bring up, it's always something that affects them personally. I think it's important to find out where there are commonalities, even across the aisle, because I don't think even the most rabid person who's stuck in there, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I think there are commonalities. And I think as a senator, as a legislator, I think it's important that we find those commonalities such that there may not be everything that we agree on, but there are some things that we might agree on. I also believe that it's important that as a state legislator, I find out what's happening in other districts. I think if there's something working in District 39 or working in District 35 or working in District 33, why wouldn't I make sure that if it's something that's positive, it's something that we need in our district, why wouldn't I work with that senator to either advance a bill that would be beneficial for all, or at least get what they're doing and make sure that we're providing that to here in 38. So I think it's about building relationships, building on those relationships that I've already built over a number of years with a number of legislators, as well as reaching across the aisle, finding those commonalities, finding those things that we can agree on. So again, that we can, as I like to say, a better Georgia for all as part of our campaign platform to make sure that everyone's included in those decisions and in that process.
Thank you so much for that question. I would like to pass it over to Harvey Davis. Mr. Davis, you have the floor.
Actually, they pretty much answered my questions. And again, I understand the numbers, and we all understand the numbers. And of course, the challenge is for us in this area is that we don't have the votes. So, you need to be strategic in how you approach those issues and reach across the aisle, because at the end of the day, current situation is no matter what happens, for instance, the Fulton County Commission bill, all we were able to do was to oppose the bill and watch it come into fruition. So I believe in coalitions, regardless of party or whatever. And, I think that's an important factor in being an effective legislator.
Thank you for your comments. Now, for the residents that are viewing, if you have a question for our three candidates for Senate, please use the reactions option and raise your hand, and I will acknowledge you and unmute your phone. And there was a message sent to me in the chat, and this is a question for all of the candidates. If a Democratic governor is elected at the end of this year and a possible shift in control of the General Assembly, what primary bill will you push first for your district? And also, why would you choose that bill? This is a question for all of our candidates. We will go backwards this time and start with you, Mr. Carson. You have the floor.
If there's a shift in the State House and the Senate, I mean, we definitely have to do everything that we can to overturn SB 202. I think it's critical. I mean, our voting rights are important, not only to everyone in the state. I think it's important that, and I said this last week, I think it's important that if we're able to have a Democratic senator, preferably the one who's the only Democratic candidate on the ballot, then I think it's important to make sure that she has the individuals who are ready to go in and be the type of legislators that she will need to make sure that we not only look at voting rights, but we look at some of the other pieces of legislation that undermine marginalized communities. So I think voting rights would be one. And again, top to bottom, look at those pieces of legislation that undermine marginalized communities.
Thank you. Mr. Petty, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Absolutely. 1A is doing what we can do to repeal and strike down SB 202, unbelievably known as the Election Integrity Act of 2021. I think we can all agree it's the actual opposite of that. It's legislation that was, as we all know, right, it was partisan legislation that didn't really do anything to help protect our voting rights here as Georgians. And I think that that is the most critical threat to us right now, is the attack on our voting rights. I think 1B would be something that I would like to address, would be our rising housing costs, our costs of renting and buying homes. I think that we have seen over the past years, 4 or 5 years now, prior to COVID, we've seen these rates continue to start to creep up very steadily, and now they're at all-time highs. And what that is doing is that's making it more difficult for us to live here in an area that we all love. And it's all across the district. It's not just in Atlanta. I've been in Cobb County and spoken to Cobb County elected officials, and they've talked to me about the same rising prices that are happening right there in Smyrna or in Austell or Mapleton. So these are real problems that we need to address. A 1C, and I'll add on as a rider to 1B, is really talking about the things that we can do to make sure we have livable wages. Livable wages seem to be falling way behind and not keeping up with the increase in our housing costs. So if you're not making enough money, but the home that you're staying in or the rent that you're staying in is going to continue to go up, how is it that you're able to actually stay in your home and afford to live there and also put food on the table and clothes on your children's backs? So we need to address that. It's a critical need, just as critical as repealing and overturning and undoing SB 202. So those are some of the things that I think that we would need to address from day one. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bray, you have the floor.
So I definitely agree that affordable housing would be at the top of my list. The government entities, whether it's federal, state, your local, your city, your county, have a lot of unused land. And one of the reasons why pricing keeps going up is that there just simply aren't enough houses or apartments for the number of people who want them. So if there's not enough of something, that means you can charge more. So being able to use that land and increase supply so that we can have more things to choose from and reduce the cost would be top of the list. And right next to it would be education. Right now, we're not fully funding education. We had a little bit of an increase in our budget this past year, but that was just to restore the cuts that we already did. We have not fully funded education, and in particular, we haven't accounted for the effect of people not having resources in the home in order to educate their children. We need to be able to increase education so that everybody has the same level of access. And to Mr. Davis's point, Both of those things are bipartisan issues. It doesn't matter whether you're in rural red Georgia or you're here in, urban Democratic Atlanta. Education, being able to educate your kids and being able to afford where you live is something that everybody is having an issue with right now.
Thank you. And Ms. Yoshina Colbert Bradford, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was going to just type it in the chat because I have my 1-year-old and you can hear him loudly now.
Okay.
My question was, though, kind of piggybacking off of Ms. Bray's question, just not having enough inventory because I am a realtor. But what on a state level will they be able to do from the Senate side to work with local level to help with blight properties and allowing us to give just a small percentage of time, for owners who are not active owners, and you have so many blight properties in neighborhoods. So I guess my overall question is, what would be their solution for blight property? Or is that something that they can work? If they don't work with that, who does, and would they work across the board to collaborate?
Ms. Bray, you have the floor.
Sure. So to your question, blighted properties, for the most part, are a city issue, but the state can create incentives or cash incentives for folks to fix those up. And that can be funneled through your city and county entities to hit the city level. And so to be able to provide some of the budget in affordable housing toward when, as a property owner, someone decides to buy a property that's blighted and fix it up. And then the key is that they must then rent it or sell it at a rate that is actually going to be affordable. So the idea that if you're going to be doing that and then selling the house for $600,000, who is that going to help? So the incentive has to actually be tied to the end result. And that can flow from the state down into the city level.
Thank you. Mr. Petty, would you like to answer this question?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Colbert Bradford, for the question. Thank you to the little man over there. Sounds like he also wants to get involved and he's fired up for the election season. So that's good to hear. I think ultimately it's great points that you and Ms. Bray are making. I think ultimately this is a matter that's going to take collaboration. That goes back to, I think, what we all referenced earlier in our remarks about building relationships and making sure that we are walking our neighborhoods, walking our communities, and finding out exactly, what has been the cause of the blight, what has caused people to move out of those homes or keep their homes in disrepair. Is it for lack of income? Is it for lack of opportunity in the area? And then we can address those things one by one, all at the same time, right? We have to make sure that we're doing a comprehensive approach because this is not an issue, for example, that is going to go away very quickly. It's going to be slow and methodical. And we can even talk about apartments that need to be renovated or just completely knocked down or rebuilt, or we can talk about homes that need the same. But ultimately, I think that what we need to have is collaboration among ourselves at our state level, with our community partners in the county, and also at the local level in the city. Thank you.
Mr. Carson, you have the floor.
Good evening, Ms. Colbert Bradford. Thank you for the question. For me, I think it's a couple of things. One, there's a land use bank, and we have to utilize that such that these blighted properties, these communities, people are buying these communities up and they're getting those properties at a much reduced rate. But oftentimes that doesn't trickle down to the people who live in those communities. So I think we have to look at land use banks and making it such that not only certain individuals can take advantage of a land use bank, but make sure that the people that live in the community can take advantage of the land use bank as well. The second thing I think when we talk about affordable housing, everyone, depending on who you talk to and where they live, you'll mention tiny housing, you'll mention mixed use, you'll mention a number of different options, and then you'll hear, not in my community. I don't want this in my community. I don't want that in my community, but I want affordable housing. So I think one of the things we also have to look at are these community agreement whereby we need to find out what they want in their community. Affordable housing doesn't mean the same thing for everybody across the board. There are people who think affordable housing is $500,000 for a home, but that's not the same for someone who's barely making a livable wage who can afford that. So I think it's important that we understand, exercise the land use banks, and that we also make sure that the community benefit agreements are in place so that we find out and we know what the communities actually want with respect to affordable housing or any economic development. Because for most of these communities, we have to deal with community development as a part of that economic development. So they have to be ready to purchase a home. They have to be ready to make the investment, the return on investment for those that have lived in those homes. We have to make sure that they're ready to do that. And in order to do that, we have to communicate with the people who live in those communities, such that that we're not just legislating something or working with our community partners to do something that is contrary to really what they want in their community.
Thank you for addressing the question. For the audience, if you would like to ask the candidates a question, please use the reactions option and raise your hand. Thank you. All right, Ms. Shay Steed, you have the floor.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
You can.
Okay. My question is for all the candidates. This legislative session this year, legalized gambling had been on the table, of course, for years in Georgia. And this year was very close to having, they were very close to having something in place. Horse racing was also on the table and saw some support in committee. And the city of South Fulton or either South Fulton County could possibly see a track or either casino if gambling is legalized. What is your position on this being a possible economic engine for South Fulton?
Ms. Bray.
So it does seem like every year legalized gambling gets a little bit closer to actually passing. I am for the legislation if the neighborhoods that they're planning on putting these, whether it's a track or an actual physical casino, those neighborhoods have to be on board before they allow that to happen. I am more for what they call the DraftKings bill, which is more about sports betting as opposed to the physical infrastructure around a gambling structure. I think that it takes more time to get a neighborhood to have input, have there be some feedback and the back and forth, but sports betting, it's clear that everybody's doing it already. You know, your own work pool is just bet on March Madness. It's already happening. And that is a chunk of money that could be pushed into places like education and affordable housing without being demanding on a neighborhood by actually having a physical thing there. So that, I mean, it would be yes for DraftKings and potentially yes for physical infrastructure, but it would have to be with neighborhood support.
Thank you. Mr. Carson?
I'm all for it. Don't mean to sound like an echo chamber for Ms. Bray, but I'm all for it if the neighborhood's all for it as well. I think for me, with respect to betting and gambling, is the effects of betting and gambling. So what mechanism, what things are in place to make sure that A, the community's on board, B, is sustainable for the community, and C, that we make sure that individuals who are betting, if they were, somehow develop a habit to that nature, how are we making sure that we address those things? Oftentimes we use, and we hear that we'll put this money into, education, or we'll put this money into other things that are supposedly will make our state better. But oftentimes that doesn't necessarily happen. So I think, again, I'm for it, the community's for it. But if the community's not for it, then obviously I wouldn't push it forward.
Thank you. Mr. Petty, you have the floor.
Thank you for the question. That's a great question. And I think that ultimately we're going to go 3 for 3 here, Ms. Steed. I am for it if the community is for it. However, I do believe that we need to have some assurances. If we're talking about building physical infrastructure, as senator, I would want to know who are going to be, or how are these bids going to be solicited, right? Who is going to get notice of the bids in order to do some of the contracting work? You know, the people who are going to build the hard structure, the people who are going to pave the roads. Those are companies that are going to come across and submit bids from all across the state and maybe even elsewhere. And I want to know what is their history? Are these businesses that are, you know, minority owned or women owned? Are they veteran owned businesses? How many of those businesses have received the opportunity to bid on this particular business opportunity? Those are some of the things that I would want to make sure we have assurances to know that if we are going to end up building and creating something that our community ultimately wants, we need to make sure that we're going to have, we're going to be actually included in building it and then sustaining it. So who are we going to be employing? Are the employees that are going to work in the casino or at the racetrack? Are they going to be employees that are local, from the local community? What are we going to do in transportation? If they need transportation to get there, are we going to expand MARTA to get there? Is it going to be cobbling, you know, coming from, you know, some part of South Cobb, for example? We need to make sure that we address the second and third order effects and have a long-term look at the prospect as opposed to just what it can do for us right now. But ultimately, if the community wants it, I think that is absolutely worth looking at.
Thank you. Ms. Colbert Bradford, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. And no 1-year-old right now. But my question is to kind of piggyback on the gambling or the economic development of having that in a neighborhood. Say the neighborhoods don't want it. My first part of the question would be, as a senator, what is your actual role in helping develop or bringing economic development to our areas in our neighborhood? So what is your role in that actual part? How do you do that, and how are you effective to us? And the second part of that is, if you do have a major role in bringing smart economic development to our neighborhoods, what would be your plan, and what is a part of that plan of smart development?
Mr. Carson, you have the floor.
With respect to a state senator's role, it would be to make sure that needs that we receive from the federal level would then come to our districts, our county, you know, the county commissioners and the local municipalities. With respect to what smart economic development, what that would look like, it would depend on the, again, it would depend on the community. What's needed in the city of Fulton would be different from what's needed in South Cobb, what's needed in Smyrna, and what's needed in, you know, Adamsville, Collier Heights area. So I think it's important, as I mentioned in my opening, that we have someone in office who has relationships with state, local, and municipal elected officials, and who can also cultivate those relationships, continue to build on those relationships to make sure that the people in the district receive the things that they want. It's not enough for me to say, yeah, this is what I'm going to do for the city of South Fulton, when I don't even know what the city of South Fulton wants. And then it might just be something that I have to work with a local municipality, with the mayor of Fulton or the council persons in the city of South Fulton and the residents to make sure that that's done. But that might look something totally different from what individuals in Cobb want. For instance, the individuals in South Cobb, they want a bank. They want to know how I can work with the banking legislature to get them a bank and to get some other things that they want in South Cobb. So it really depends on what the community wants and what the people want.
Thank you. Ms. Bray, you have the floor.
So the role, in my opinion, would be kind of three categories. One is recruitment, there's inclusion of the community, and funding. So starting with funding, there's money out there, whether it's on the federal level, the state level. There's even, public-private partnerships with charitable organizations. You work as a facilitator to bring that funding for a particular development. Making sure that the development itself is for the community and not for someone else. So there's plenty of examples around Atlanta that there's a really great development that's coming in, but it's clear that they're targeting not the people who currently live there, they're targeting the people they wish lived there. And so making sure that you as a senator are keeping an eye on the developers that are chosen and that they're building for the community and not for who they think should be living in that area. And then lastly, it is recruitment. So making sure that those developers, those thought partners, those other, whether it's legislators, like for instance, a House rep that has an overlapping area with us, or a city council member, that all of those folks are working together to recruit the right players at the table to build a development that actually works for the community.
Thank you. Mr. Petty, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I think at the risk of sounding redundant, I think ultimately the role as the senator first is to be involved in just every single part of the recruitment and securing funding. I think ultimately, as we talk about economic development and how do we bring businesses to our community, as we know, there's plenty of space, even right here in South Fulton, to develop and bring businesses, to recruit businesses. But we need to make sure that we're recruiting the right types of businesses, that we're recruiting businesses that want to be a part of the community, that want to have staying power and be here, not just to turn a profit, but to also become part of the community. And the only way we do that is just by vetting. We talk to potential business owners. We talk to people who want to expand maybe a currently existing business and bring it to our district. And we have those relationships that we're able to sit down, have frank and candid conversations about what it is our vision is out of the community, what our vision is for our community, so that we don't have just a piecemeal of random businesses line up and down in the Fulton Industrial. We want to make sure there's a cohesiveness that in continuity that brings a character to our community. I think if we can do that, we can look at securing funding, whether it be from the federal level or not, that we can use incentives, even in tax credits and things of that nature, to help make sure that we are making it attractive for people to come here and bring their businesses here. And then, and secondly, I think ultimately the question about the plan is just the plan of doing it slowly. We need to make sure that we don't rush into just developing just for the sake of developing. Let's make sure that we have a plan that is cohesive, and make sure that we have a plan that makes sense so that we can have some sustainability for the long term.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, you have the floor.
Yes, I just wanted to make a couple comments in general, and it doesn't necessarily involve this particular race, but my pet peeve is that folks often get confused about where the responsibility lies and who has the authorization to do something in particular. In other words, for example, with casino and being in an area that where people either want them or don't. First of all, I'm pretty certain that bill was going to be on the ballot for us to approve or not. But beyond that, most of what's allowable in any particular area is done at the city level with council members. And the development process is pretty complex. And there are limits to what we can do from the public sector versus the private sector. But, I just think it's important for everyone to get an understanding of what people can and cannot do in elected office, as well as how the development process works. Lastly, I just want to say that, yes, we do have a lot of land down here, but it's really up to the property owner to court the business that we want. So it's just important for us all to understand governance better and know what a candidate can and cannot do, as we found out in last year's municipal elections. Thank you.
Ms. Marsha Still, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. This question is for all the candidates. I'm kind of going to change it up a little bit because I'm curious to find out your positions on the SR 165 and the HR 281, the legalization of marijuana in the state of Georgia. How do you feel about the legalization for adults 21 and over being able to purchase marijuana? Not only that, I'd like your opinion as well on the expungement of previous convictions of small quantities of marijuana.
Ms. Bray, you have the floor.
So I'll take the easy one. The expungement issue, I'm 100% for. I think that is, that's an easy way for someone to step before a judge with a long rap sheet when it's something that they happened to get caught on that other people didn't. But as far as whether marijuana should be legalized fully, first, we had a medical marijuana bill that was up this past session that wasn't able to make its way all the way to the governor's desk. And that to me is an easier kind of entry into it, just knowing some of the practical realities of what's going on down at the Dome. I think that there's actually some headway there, and I would be for that. For overall legalization, I think it's a long way down the line. Whenever it actually becomes a real possibility, I would be for it. I think if you look at other states around the nation, the amount of tax revenue that is able to come from the legalization is money that can be used in a lot of really, really incredible ways, in particular, which I keep harping on it, but we need more money toward education and affordable housing. And that would be a fantastic kind of pipeline of funds. So I would be for it, making sure that we have actual practical option for it down the line. But medical marijuana, I think, is actually going to be coming pretty soon.
Thank you. Mr. Carson, your response?
Yes and yes, I'm for both. Over the years, I've seen a number of women who have long criminal records as a result of marijuana possessions. I think we have to do it smart. I think we have to also make sure that there are opportunities for individuals, particularly people of color, to make sure that they're able to take advantage of the economic opportunities that come along with that. The state of Illinois, I think they set the right tone with what their governor proposed, and that was expungement, as well as with the legalization. I think just legalizing marijuana doesn't do any one particular thing if we're not looking at the economic benefits that could afford our, for business owners and those that would want to be distributors and growers. But I also think we need to look at how it has devastated our community with respect to criminal justice. So I think we definitely have to look at the expungement process, what that means, and for who that's for. So yes, for me, that it's simple. It's yes and yes to both.
Thank you. Mr. Petty, you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. As a criminal defense attorney now, and as a prosecutor a few months ago, and everywhere in between, I have seen firsthand, right, what the effect of a felony conviction can be, whether it's possession of marijuana with intent to distribute or something else. And what we're talking about is something that's legal in a few other states already, right? And there has been what I've heard is that marijuana is some sort of lead or lead into something heavier, right? I don't believe there's any data that shows marijuana to be some sort of a gateway drug to actual controlled substances. So I believe that that argument normally falls on its face. And I think that ultimately what we have seen is a prosecution of people of color more times than not for marijuana. We've seen context of, traffic stops and things of that nature, just for the purpose of actually pulling over this car, that an officer feels is suspicious looking, that has, 4 Black males sitting in it. We need to actually be very, very aggressive in expunging records as it pertains to marijuana, because ultimately these are convictions that are for an offense that's not going to be an offense at some point very soon. May not be next year, may not be in 2024, but marijuana has already been decriminalized and it will be legal at some point. So to the other part of the question, if I'm for the legalization of marijuana, I am if it makes sense. And I think that there's so much more research that needs to be done right here for the state of Georgia, right? What's right in Colorado may not be right for what's happening here in Georgia. I talk often about, again, who's getting the opportunity to have these businesses. If we legalize marijuana, who are going to be given the opportunity to grow and distribute the marijuana? Is it going to be an open bid process? Are we going to give an opportunity to small businesses to be able to come in and take part of that business opportunity? What is the revenue going to be used for? Those answers need to make sense. If they don't make sense, then we need to figure out how we're going to get to a place where we're not criminalizing it, we're not sending people to prison for possessing or distributing it, but we also need to make sure that we're creating revenue for our community in a way that's logical and makes sense. Marijuana can definitely be a way to do that. We just have to make sure that we have all of our T's crossed and all of our I's dotted.
Thank you. Ms. Jill Johnson, you have the floor. Please unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
You are breaking up.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
My question is, this question may have been answered. It's a two-pronged question. The first thing I'd like for all the candidates to do is to tell us all the responsibility of the state senator if it hadn't already been answered. And the next question is, will each one of you, if elected, will sponsor a bill that would stop the harassment of investors calling and showing up at our home and demanding that we sell our property?
Thank you, Ms. Ray. You have the floor. If you can address both questions.
Sure. So honestly, constitutionally, the responsibility of the state Senate, the legislature, all they're supposed to do is pass a budget. Constitutionally, that's the one thing that they're required to do. Now, I think that there's a moral obligation to do more than that. And so it's passing laws that give people an opportunity to thrive in their communities. That's really our moral responsibility, but our constitutional responsibility is singular. To your question about sponsoring a bill, stopping people from showing up on your doorstep, trying to buy your house. So the city can be doing that. City of Atlanta, for instance, they call it commercial harassment, passed a commercial harassment ordinance that punishes folks for doing that. The problem with that ordinance is that it's almost impossible to enforce. These calls come from different numbers every time. They're not given, or they're not even using their full name. They're calling through like a call center. So the number that comes up isn't the actual call that you would be able to report it to. So I feel your pain, but I'm also about practicalities. And if you have a law that's passed and you can't actually enforce it, it doesn't help anybody. So I would be open to suggestions from folks who know more than me as to how you would be able to pin folks down and track down who's actually doing the things, because just passing a bill isn't going to stop it because we can't enforce it.
Thank you. Mr. Carson?
Ms. Bray said it eloquently about what our responsibility is, and that is to pass them and for us to introduce and amend bills. I've said from the beginning that the 325 days that we aren't in session are, to me, the most critical, important days for any state legislator. And that gives us an opportunity to find out what the needs of the constituents are. It gives us an opportunity to find out, to work collaboratively with our county and with our state reps, with our mayors and with our council persons to make sure that your needs are met. I did an interview and someone said that our current state's for a particular group. And I said to them, how is she good for a particular group when she doesn't represent her constituents who are part of your group? And they couldn't answer that because their interest was to have someone there to sit and check a box for them. I think this position requires more than someone just checking a box. It requires someone who's involved in the day-to-day things that we may not be responsible for, but we can lend an ear to, lend support to. And I think that's important. And as Ms. Bray said, it would have to make sense because I get calls on a daily basis, primarily to my number. I have two numbers. I have an Illinois number and I have a Georgia number. And I get calls on a daily basis from people from Illinois asking me, do I want to sell my house in Georgia? So it would, I'm not sure how we would legislate that, particularly for those calls. And I know a number of people who don't have Georgia numbers. They have the numbers that they, with them when they moved here. So I would have to see what that legislation would look like.
Thank you. Mr. Pether?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think that I agree with what both candidates have said, so I won't belabor the point, but of course we all know just the only responsibility constitutionally is just to pass a budget. But as both candidates have said, we need to do way more than that. We are asking to be elected to represent the constituents of this district, and it is for a 2-year term. And at this particular point, we're talking about passing a budget that affects our lives with how we have access to funds, but where those funds are going to be used and how are they going to be used all year long. And that is what's most important, is that we have the actual funding, but now what are we going to do to use it? And that is exactly where I think we run afoul in this district, is we're just being underrepresented. We don't have a leader who's up at the Capitol fighting for us in the state Senate, making sure that our interests are what is placed as a priority. And that is exactly what I'm running to change. I think ultimately, as we've already discussed, as pertains to the harassment, we need to talk about, again, that is an enforcement issue. Locally, city ordinances that are passed just need to be enforced. And that's a very difficult thing to do, as you've already heard. That doesn't mean that we give up. It doesn't mean that we don't try. But I think if we can make sure that we create, maybe perhaps talk about creating task forces, it may be something we need to talk about, our local agencies hiring more agents to be able to go out and actually, look and be in the communities that are being harassed, to respond, take complaints for phone calls that are harassing phone calls. We need to, to plus up our efforts to be responsive. And I think if we can do that, very slowly, we might change the tide. But again, that's something that has to be an enforcement issue rather than what might seem to be a legislative issue.
Thank you for your responses. Ms. Johnson, did you have an additional question, or?
I'd like to make a comment, because I would not like for us to leave here not understanding that there is more that a state rep and a state senator is responsible for other than the budget. That is the number one. I agree with that, but there are other things, like, take for instance, are you having a problem with funeral homes? That is under the purview of the state. And one of the things that you have to do, once you become an elected state rep or state senator, you can, when you're called, respond to your constituents, just like Ms. Bray said, from an ethical standpoint. And you need to look at the areas that you are responsible for, because there are many more than just that budget. Because we have people who have been serving us for many years. Even when you call them, they don't respond. because I've been on my current senator about addressing the same question I ask everybody here. There is a way to force it. Yes, the cities have one, but they don't do it. And I know from checking it myself, you can run down a lot of these investors because they are sitting inside of cities like City Hall of Atlanta and all the counties, the state, and the county. So that's just a cop out to say you can't find out who's doing it, and that is that hard to reference that. And there was a bill that was introduced that I pushed the state senator Carson Tate to put it out there, but it never did make it all the way through. So I'm hoping that one of you, whoever get elected, that you will push that, and I hope you will call my number and allow me to work with you. That's all I had to say.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for our audience, if you would like to ask these candidates a question, please use the reaction option and raise your hand. All right, so I don't see any hands. So, Miss Bray, is there any topic you would like to bring up that we could discuss here?
Sorry, I had some trouble unmuting. I mean, one of the things that I think doesn't get a ton of discussion, and at least in the forums or talks that I've been able to take part in, is healthcare. I know that y'all, or some of you might be aware about the hospital, Wellstar Hospital closing, and the effect of that on communities. In particular, I know that that hospital stated that it was because their numbers were down, that people weren't using their emergency rooms, or actually people were using it but not being admitted. And what I'm not seeing discussed is the fact that people are using emergency rooms as primary care facilities because they don't have affordable health care to be able to go to a regular doctor on a consistent basis. And so I think it's important to at least raise that when we're talking about hospitals, it's not just about emergencies and surgeries, and of course all of that is incredibly important, but we need to look at healthcare across the broad spectrum, and the fact that people are using hospitals and emergency rooms as primary care places because the fact of the matter is they just can't afford healthcare. That's a huge issue that I would hope to be able to speak to at the Dome.
Thank you. Mr. Carson, would you like to address this topic?
Oh, I completely agree. That's one issue that has resonated throughout my conversation, particularly with people that have been here in Southwest Atlanta for years. The Southwest Hospital closed. And really, I mean, the city of South Fulton is what, the 8th largest city in the state, 100-some thousand residents, and we don't have a hospital. And people are, you know, you have to go to Grady, but for some reason there seems to be hospitals everywhere you turn in Cobb County. But there isn't viable, you know, besides Grady, there's a viable hospital that our communities can use. So I'm really interested in that, and the people that the constituents that I've spoken to for a number of months now, actually for a few years, are really, really concerned about, you know, how do we, you know, get better, not just a hospital for the sake of having a hospital, but again, one that will provide the quality of care that they need, and not just, you know, for having a hospital, but one that will be viable for the community. So that's been a huge topic everywhere that I've gone and the people that I've spoken with, particularly here in Southwest Atlanta.
Thank you. Mr. Petty, would you like to address this topic?
Yes, thank you. So I agree. We have a desperate healthcare crisis here in Georgia and probably many other places across the country. And I believe that we need to address that. But one other thing that I don't think that we talk enough about is criminal justice reform, or the need for it. You know, we talk about protecting our neighborhoods and making them safe. And certainly That is one of my top priorities. But I believe that we also have to talk about how we reform our criminal justice system. We cannot afford to continue to think that we're going to just arrest and prison our way into a safer community. We need to make sure that we're looking at the justice system as a whole. And when we're doing that, we need to look at rehabilitative services and things that are alternatives to prosecution. Because let's be honest here, as a prosecutor, right in Fulton County, 99.9% of defendants that I prosecuted and now that I have as clients as a criminal defense attorney are people of color. And that is just the blunt truth. And our communities are being disproportionately affected by the way our criminal justice system is set up, how it's policed, and how it is ultimately prosecuted. So I believe that we need to talk about removing some of the mandatory minimums for some of the offenses in our state statutes. I think that we need to talk about better equipping offenders to be released from prison with some sort of tangible skills and an education and ability to work on getting their record cleaned and expunged so that they're able to go out and achieve subsequent careers and whatever their chosen field happens to be. I think that we need to talk about addressing crime before crime starts. So empowering our juvenile justice system, empowering even our magistrate courts and our city courts to make sure that they're not giving people records for the sake of prosecuting and giving them a record. But let's talk about ways to address why this person was actually stealing $20 worth of laundry detergent from Walmart. What was the source of that? What caused them to make that decision that day? And then look to address that. So I think criminal justice reform is all encompassing. I think that it touches on other different priorities such as education and affordable, livable wages, and I think that those are some of the things that we don't talk enough about. Ultimately, I think that we all want to make sure that we're all safer in our neighborhoods or places where we can be and enjoy safely, but we need to also talk about making sure that we don't set ourselves up to just send people off to prison for the sake of sending people off to prison.
Thank you. Mr. Carson, is there any issue that you would like to bring up that we can discuss? Your microphone.
For me also, criminal justice reform. That's where I, again, as I mentioned earlier, I cut my teeth in some years ago. But I want to dispel the notion. I think I saw someone briefly came up in the chat about criminal justice reform being something about poverty or everyone isn't poor. Criminal justice reform, there are a number of people who are not poor citizens who have criminal backgrounds in this state. It's not so much about dealing with individuals who are poor. It's about dealing with a system that has perpetuated inadequacies against particularly people of color, men and women in this state. There are more, the number of Black women who are being incarcerated has gone up expeditiously. So I think it's important that we not only look at criminal justice reform from, we're trying to help, the poor people who can't, the indigent who can't afford an attorney. I think we have to address it. We can't look at it that way. We have to look at it from the standpoint of how it's not equal across the board for everybody. And it's not equal across the board when we talk about ethnicities and class. So I think that's important. But this is a thing, and this is what I talked about earlier about commonalities, and we were able to discuss this when I worked with Congressman Danny Davis on the Second Chance Act, and President Bush signed it. Republicans cared about they cared about the economics of it. They cared about, he cared about the economics and how this affected our communities from a tax perspective and from an economic perspective. As Mr. Petty said, we are spending a ton of money in this state locking people up with really no real result, nothing to recoup from that. our state has more people in the probation system, if people don't know this, than some nations. So we have to really look at it, not just from we're trying to open the gates and let people out, but we have to look at it from an economic standpoint and from one that will help to relieve the tax burden on this state. And then again, look at the unequal justice that's not only just been here in the state of Georgia, but throughout the country.
Thank you. And before we get to you, Mr. Petty, I want to acknowledge one of the residents, Rosalind's iPad. If you can unmute yourself and state your full name, and you have the floor. Thank you.
This is Rosalind Woolfolk, and we talked about funding education. Other than property taxes, where do you see those funds coming from, and how do you see those funds being used in our community?
Ms. Bray, you have the floor.
Sure. So part of the education funding formula is ridiculously complex, and it does need to be simplified. Some of it comes from property taxes, but also some of it already comes from the state. So where do we get the funds is really from the state budget, increasing the portion of the state budget that can go out into your county and city schools. How I would see it being used is that teachers are underpaid. That is a fact. That includes your paraprofessionals that are also in those classrooms are also underpaid, and your administrators. And often we're getting these results where we have folks in the classroom who are overtaxed, they have too many children in the class, and because of that, that's affecting a child's education. And so to me, number one is making sure you pay people what they're worth for the work that you think is important. It should look important in the paycheck. So for me, number one would be increasing the pay of the folks who are actually providing services for our students.
Thank you. Mr. Carson?
We definitely need to increase the budget for public education. I support public education wholeheartedly. We often hear that Georgia is good for business, but often business I don't think is good for people who work hard and in this state. So I think that, yeah, we're giving businesses tax credits so they can come to the state, but there also has to be an investment from these businesses so that we can make sure that in our budget, we fund the education. And what I mean by that is we aren't continuing just to give tax credits for the sake of giving tax credits. We need to recoup some money from some of these businesses so that we can help adequately pay our teachers, pay administrators. I was on a call earlier with a teacher in Cobb County, and because of the way the system is set up, she doesn't get bread, is in a room with 40 children, and they're all special needs children. And she's been underpaid. And oftentimes, I mean, my wife is a former educator, so I know oftentimes teachers are using their own monies to make sure that they provide for their students and for our kids. So we have to make sure that we take care of our teachers and our administrators, but we have to make sure that we recoup some of the tax dollars that we're just giving away by not taxing some of these businesses. I think that's important as well.
Mr. Petty, would you like to address this question?
Yes, thank you. Briefly, I agree with both candidates have already spoken. I think what our state budget right now, we have a surplus of maybe something like $2 billion or something to that effect. There's money out here in the state that can go to help fully fund our schools. And I believe that us relying on the funding formula as it currently stands is just not actually smart, and it's not good for our children in this day and age. I think that ultimately our schools have changed, the needs in our schools have changed, the population in our school districts has also just probably doubled. I'm kind of estimating at that point, but my point is, you know, our schools have just absolutely ballooned in terms of the student to teacher ratio. And our teachers, as the other candidates have already mentioned, our teachers are overworked, they're underpaid, they're under-resourced, They don't have the ability to actually effectively manage their classrooms. And our children are the ones that end up suffering as well because they don't get the quality education that they deserve. So I think that our state can be more creative in terms of creating better funding or more funding that goes down to our local districts, so that our schools are fully funded. I think there has been a growth also in charter schools that have also received some of the state funding that I don't necessarily believe in school choice. I don't believe that we need to send our kids elsewhere to go to school. I think that we need to empower our local schools, empower our public schools, stand behind our teachers and our administrators, our principals, our school janitors and cafeteria workers, and make sure they have a wage that allows them to come to work and do what they love to do, which is to help teach, educate, and shape our next generation. I think that we need to empower them. We do that by bringing more funding, from the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Petty, while I have you, is there a topic you would like to discuss?
It was, and I guess I apologize. I went into criminal justice reform. That was the topic that I guess for the sake of time, that I would like to normally discuss, that I don't believe has normally discussed. So I can go over that again, or if everybody heard that particular response, I would submit that as my answer to that question.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, we have a question from the chat. One of the history's headlines for the past few decades will center on the ever-growing concentration of wealth among a rather elite few. Along with an increasing economic divide and a decline in the American creed of upward mobility, as a senator, how will you reverse this trend, Mr. Petty?
You know, I think in our society, we need to make sure that we are taking care of those that don't necessarily have the opportunities that others have received. Now, I don't mean that we necessarily give handouts, but we need to make sure that we give opportunities. And by doing that, I think it starts in education. We just talked about education, and I think that that is an effective place to start. I think that we need to make sure that we in our schools are giving our children opportunities to learn college preparatory information, to get ready to go to school if they want to go to college. But there's a segment of population, our students, that don't necessarily want to go to college. It may not be for them, maybe not right now. They want to go and get a trade. And there are so many opportunities right here in the state of Georgia to go ahead and go to a technical school, to go to Atlanta Metro Technical College, right, and get a trade, be it HVAC or engine repair or something to that effect. And a lot of these schools have programs that are actually fully funded from the state. We need to do a better job of actually just advertising these programs and making sure that information is passed down to our students. If we can do that, we can educate our children into something that they're actually excited about, something that they want to do, something that they can excel in. I think that we have now slowly created a more diverse and better qualified workforce. And when we have a more diverse and qualified workforce that's out in the population looking for jobs, now we get to demand that our jobs pay our workforce what they are actually, what they're worth, what their education and what their skill set demands. And by doing that, I think we raise our state minimum wage to go well beyond the federal wage. I think that we need to do that by attracting businesses that are capable, able, and willing to make sure that they have a diverse workforce that they can actually pay. When we do that, and this is tiered, but when we do that, we start to create a higher, lower level. So we're raising the lower level. We're creating a less of a gap between pay gap between the well-to-do and the super wealthy and those that are not as fortunate. So I think that it's an approach that we need that starts possibly with education and also starts with opportunity, and that leads from business development, creating jobs in our particular community that pay a livable wage, and then some. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go to you, Mr. Carson, I see we have a question from the audience. We are going to take your two responses, the question from the audience, and then we'll proceed into closing remarks. So, Mr. Carson, you have the floor.
Thank you for the question. I am a big proponent of youth workforce development. I'm also a proponent of reskilling and upskilling opportunities for individuals who have retired and maybe maybe want to get back into the workforce. There are a number of ways that we can provide incentives for our young people. One of the ways I saw effectively for a number of years, and that's provide them with paid internships for the summer. I think when companies partner with our schools and partner with kids and provide them with an opportunity to be mentored, an opportunity to learn a trade or be prepared for college, I think that makes a big difference. We also, again, I have to go back to this, keep harping on this. We have to make sure these businesses are held accountable. How do we allow a business to come into our community and the only thing our community gets is a laptop? Only thing our school gets is a laptop. There should be some type of agreement with that business, with that tech company, such that our children will have the opportunity to have prepared for those 21st century jobs that are needed. And I think with doing that and making sure that what comes along with that is a livable wage. What that is right now, it's kind of hard to say because we already heard the reports that most people can't afford to live in Atlanta, can't afford to live in Cobb, can't afford to live in most places now because they aren't making enough money because the gap has stretched so much between CEOs and those workers. That's why for me, I'm going to be super hard on these businesses because I think it's important that as we continue to do right by the people that they hire and that they employ. So for me, I think youth workforce development, reskilling and upskilling opportunities for individuals who want to learn a new trade and a new craft, and holding business to make sure that they're offering opportunity here in the state.
Thank you. Ms. Bray, you have the floor.
So a lot of how this breaks down is, it's tax day today, right? So it's the way that we're taxed. I am for that top tier of folks having a higher tax bracket. You have to pay more when you earn more. And using that to be able to do things like Mr. Petty had mentioned of needs-based scholarships in education, whether that's technical school or going to a four-year college. But you got to have the money to do that some way. And so being able to change the tax brackets, not just on the federal level, but we also have them at the state level as well, to be able to increase that tax bracket at the top tier to make sure that we have increased money to be able to provide those supplemental services that people need in education and healthcare, affordable housing, et cetera.
Thank you. And for our last question, we'll take the question from Shay Steed. Ms. Steed, you have the floor. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I got a really important question that I just thought of before for the candidates. And as a native Atlantan, it's really essential response I would like to hear from them. I know too, Mr. Carson, Mr. Petty, y'all are not originally from Atlanta. Ms. Bray, I'm sorry, I missed if you were or not, and I apologize. But I would just like to hear from the candidates, their position on their support of the Atlanta Falcons and their prospects this year of making it to the Super, next year making it to the Super Bowl. Thank you.
I love a hard-hitting question. To answer your question, no, I'm not from Atlanta. I moved here in 2004. I thought that I would leave and go to law school somewhere else. And wouldn't you know it, almost 20 years later, I'm still here because Atlanta just kind of has a way of keeping you around. For the Falcons, I don't know is there an alternative? I'm not aware of there being any scenario other than they take the whole thing. So that's me.
Carson, you have the floor.
Well, I'm gonna keep it real. I'm not from Atlanta, and the Falcons broke my heart because of the 28-3 lead they had to the Patriots, and they lost the Super Bowl. I was all in. I was dug in. I was like, and actually, I'm probably one of the only Matt Ryan fans. Every time I talk to a diehard Atlanta Falcon fan, they do not like Matt Ryan. So I think if they're able to solidify a number of the positions that they have open, I think they'll be fine this year. Of course I'll be rooting for them. The interesting thing, I was a Braves. I know you didn't ask about the Braves, but I was a Braves fan before I moved here. So, but the Falcons, they broke my heart losing to the Patriots. But yeah, I could definitely root for them. So that's about as real as I can get. That's about as supportive as I can.
Thank you. And Mr. Petty.
Thank you. Ms. D, thank you for the question. I'm a long-suffering New York Jets fan, being from New Jersey originally. I don't know why I picked the Jets to be my team, 25 years ago. So anyone is better than the Jets. And the Falcons, barely, but they are still better than the Jets. So there's no year like this year, right? So Matty Ice is gone. Sorry, Mr. Carson, but he had to go. So Matty Ice is gone. I think that they stand a much better chance than my Jets do. But I like the home team. Tailgating is always fun down there on Northside Drive. So I love the Falcons, even if it's just to go and watch somebody lose or win big. And typically the Falcons are losing big, but they're better than my Jets.
Thank you so much for responding to that question. We are going to take one last question from Harvey Davis. Now, when you answer this question, if you can also incorporate your closing remarks after you answer his question. Mr. Davis, you have the floor.
I just wanted to reinforce the importance of coalitions in the legislature as it relates to us getting a hospital. Some people don't know it, but you need a certificate of need to open a hospital in the city of South Fulton, for example. And the troubling thing about that law is that the hospitals that they would be competing with have to give approval for that certificate of need, as well as the Department of Community Health with the state. And I just say all that to say, without a certificate of need, which is not transferable, Oprah or Tyler Perry couldn't open a hospital, even if they plunked down $500 million. So I just say that to reinforce the fact that that issue is at the state level, and we need to gain consensus so we can make changes to that. Thank you. I appreciate everyone participating. And at the end of the day, it's really important to understand what you can do with the authority of the office that hopefully some of you will have, and know what you can and can't do when we make commitments. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Now, Ms. Bray, would you like to lead us off with your closing remarks?
Sure, thank you. First to Mr. Davis, thank you for pointing that out. I was not aware of the certificate of need statute, and I would love to be able to look into that should I be given the opportunity to be your state senator. For those who joined the call late, again, my name's Melody Bray. I have been living in Atlanta for about 18 years. And like I said in my last response, I didn't intend to stay here, but I am still here because I love this place. I love the people. I love the culture. I love the history of what we're all stepping into and trying to carry forward. And I'm running to be a state senator for all of us, not just because we haven't been represented for years, but because we need to actually start pushing things forward. It's not about sitting back and waiting for bills to come across your desk. It's about hearing something like what Mr. Davis just said, and actually taking a proactive approach and saying, I'm going to go look at that statute. I'm going to talk to some folks and see what is the actual legal ramification behind it? And what do we need to do to change it to make it easier for people to build hospitals where they're needed? And that's my commitment. My other commitment is simply responsiveness. I believe it was Ms. Johnson who was stating that she was trying to reach out to her representatives and was not getting callbacks, was not getting responses to emails, and didn't have anybody who seemed to want to engage. We need folks who are wanting to engage. And we might not agree on things. We might even agree on an end game, but might disagree on the approach. But regardless, we can still have a conversation and try to build a consensus and make a way forward that keeps everyone talking to one another, engaging with one another, and making sure that our neighbors are thriving. So thank you so much. You can find out more www.brayforgasenate.com or at Bray for GA Senate on any of your social media channels. Thanks so much for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you for participating. Mr. Carson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, was aware of the certificate of need process. As a matter of fact, the Republican Party brought a bill forth, what they were calling it the con bill, and basically saying that a number of the lobbyists and those that supported support the process as it is, they were blocking them from making some substantial changes to it. So I'm aware that the certificate of need process is something that they're the ones that dictate the hospitals and how that all works. And I do believe that we need to change that process. So that is something that I actually agree across the party lines with, that that process needs to be changed. I'm Michael Carson, as I said, and as you've heard, and as you see my name. As a 7-year-old, I had the opportunity, I would say, to save my sisters from a fire. Our family was dirt poor. I mean, I'm the oldest son of teen parents who what we call today essential workers. And basically they were out working, trying to make ends meet. And I was alone with my sisters, and our apartment caught fire. And I was able to save them from that fire, not knowing what to do. But I believe it was at that inflection point that my career, if I will, of service began, by serving my family, then serving our country in the military, and ultimately and continually to serve our community. I'm proud of the work that I've done in Cobb County and around introducing cash bail reform. I'm proud of the work that I've done in Cobb County, working with the Cobb County Police to make sure that they update their training manuals, implicit bias, and how to address individuals with mental health needs. I'm proud of my work in Fulton County with the Fulton County DA's office on the Conviction Integrity Unit. We were able to recently request that someone be let out of prison because of the unfair sentencing that they received. I'm proud of my work in the city of South Fulton on the zoning board of appeals. So I'm working in the community now. I already have the footprint in both Cobb and in Fulton County. And as I mentioned earlier, I have legislators and state and the county and local municipal elected officials on speed dial because they know me, because I've worked with them as a community advocate. So I'm asking you, those of you that are on this call, those of you that are watching, for your vote to be your next state senator for District 38, because as my tagline, it's not just a tagline, but it's something I wholeheartedly believe in. I will be that visible and viable community leader that you can count on, someone who will be working hard on your behalf. For more information about me and about the campaign, please go to carsonforsenate.com, our phone number, and you can reach us on Facebook and Instagram as well. That information is there. So thank you for the opportunity to serve, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening.
All right, thank you. Mr. Petty, close us out.
All right, thank you. Mr. Davis, thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions earlier. Thank you for all of the residents of South Fulton that have joined the Zoom or watching elsewhere online. I want to thank the South Fulton Coalition for inviting us here tonight. I think that one thing we can all agree on is this is a time for change. We have seen change happen in our local elections, most recently, electing new mayors and new members of our city council in South Fulton, in Atlanta, and elsewhere. The time is now. We don't have to necessarily forget. We don't have to necessarily forget about the sacrifices that those before us have made, the work that they've put in to get us to where we are. But there's a time where you need to actually take a step forward and be aggressive and be passionate while you're doing it. And 2022 is the time to do that. My name is Adam Petty, and I am running for the Senate district because I am passionate about service. What I'd like to just touch on very briefly is I am a product of a single parent household. My father passed when I was 7 years old, and my mother was at that point forced to raise my sister and I by herself. And my mother taught me so many things. One of the things was service, and she had us from a very early age doing community service, coat drives, soup kitchens, just making sure that we were grateful for the opportunities that we had and that we paid them forward. And that has served me all the way through my present life as an adult. I served in the military and I still serve. I'm in the Army Reserve currently. I did 6.5 years on active duty, including a deployment. Services in my family from the very beginning, from the Civil War to present day. I've served my local community as a gang prosecutor, fighting every single day, 18-hour days at times, to make sure that Fulton County, our residents right here in South Fulton, are made safer, that their homes are more secure. It was hard work, it was challenging work, but I loved every single moment of it. I've also been fortunate to really open my own business. Now, as a small business owner, being able to run my own solo practice, I know exactly what it takes to run a business and to do a service to my community that actually helps push our thriving economy. I exactly know what it takes in terms of sacrifice every single day, because of there's wins and there's losses as a defense attorney, but you have to always continue to push, you have to always continue to fight. And that's the spirit that I would bring to the state Senate if you give me the opportunity and elect me to do that. The last thing I want to touch on is just one of my other big passions. So whether it's fighting in the courtroom, advocating for my client or not, whether it's spending just a little bit of time that I'm able to spend with my wife, whether it's my beloved fraternity and mentoring young men within my fraternity and outside of my fraternity. I've had an opportunity to come across some very talented young people in our next generation. I've been mentoring for 20 years now, and I do it every single week at the Next Level Boys Academy down in Union City. And what I've learned is that our next generation, they're watching us. They need to see an example. They need to see exactly how to move our community forward. They need a responsible leader who's going to sit down with them and show them the way. That's what people did for me. That's what my mother did for me. That's what my community did for me. That's what I'm doing now for our local citizens right here in Fulton County. That is the spirit that I bring every single day as I go about, defending cases, serving in the military, and just trying to be the best neighbor that I can be right here in West Cascade. So I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking that you all give me an opportunity to serve you. I've served at every single level. I've served at the federal level. I've served right here in my county, and now I'm looking to serve this great state Senate District of 38. I'm asking you to go to the website, adam4ga.com. You can check out all of my information about my campaign, learn a little bit more about me, and you can get my contact information, my phone numbers, my emails, and you can reach out to me so we can talk about what is it that you want to have happen and what you need from your elected senator. You can also follow the social media and you can share the message. I'm humbly asking for your vote. I thank you for joining us tonight, and I look forward to talking to you all again very soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for joining and participating in tonight's town hall. To the candidates, if you can put your contact information as well as your campaign information in the chat for anyone that wants to visit your website or contact us. In the chat, you'll also see a URL to the South Fulton Coalition's website. You can go to the website and you can view our schedule of upcoming town halls. Tomorrow, we will be featuring the town hall for the chairperson for Board of County Commission. We will have Jewel Johnson, and we will also have Sonia Russell, and we are working on trying to get Rob Pitts to join. So we will be featuring them tomorrow. And if you would like to join the South Fulton Coalition, you can learn more about us on our website. I would like to thank everybody for coming out, and everybody have a good night.